Thanks, Chelsea.
Okay. Our next person speaking is an amazing young woman from New Zealand named Sarah Hudson. She is the co-founder of Kariraro Research Collective, a group that is dedicated to honoring traditional Maori lands and culture and learning from this to build on the future. Sarah is also the author of, and correct me if I pronounce this wrong, please, Sarah, Mana Whenua? Yeah.
Mana Whenua.
I murdered it. A collection of images and communications between Sarah and other artists using natural pigments. Although small, her book packs an emotional and visual punch with the stories and lives that are shared. It gives insights into individual art practices and the larger issues of self-determination and Maori sovereignty. Please, everybody welcome Sarah Hudson.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I'm just going to start off with a bit of an opening in my ancestral language, Maori. Manua mai tēnei I ahuanin mai. Manua mai tēnei I whenotia. Manua mai tēnei he kāpuna one. O paritu maunga, o parawhenua mea, o ukurangi. E whakaata mai nei e kōkiri. This blessing was written for Kawararo Research Collective by Te Kahurere Mō Taumata just last month, and loosely translated into English. It asks, I evoke this made of earth. I evoke this made into earth. I evoke this handful of earth. This is the life force of Papatua Nuku, of Paritu Maunga, of Parawhenua Mea, of Ikurangi, reflected unto me, go forth. So those names are 4 of our female deities who kind of embody Mother Earth, Papatua Nuku, Paritu Maunga, the mountains, Parawhenua Mea, she's cool. She's kind of earthly water and silts. And Ukurangi, who is clays. So those four, often represented as female deities, are who we kind of greet and meet as Maori doing earth pigment research. I'm Sarah Hudson. I am an artist and a mum and a researcher based in Whakatane, Aotearoa, New Zealand. I am Ngāti Awa, Ngāi Tūhoi, Ngāti Pūkeko, those are my tribal links, and I am on the unceded ancestral lands of my people in Whakatane. Thanks so much for the invitation to speak. I'm going to talk today about Ko-Wairaro Research Collective, how we got started, and the publication that I produced last year. And I'd also like to thank Chelsea, who is taking the wheel with changing my slides today. So if we could switch those over now, that would be great. Thanks, Chelsea. Cool, change slide. So this is where I am talking from today, Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'll be referring to this country's name by the name given to it by its Indigenous people, Aotearoa. Could we change slide? This is a kind of government issued map showing the kind of tribal borders. This is just kind of shows some of the diversity, the amount of individual peoples that we're talking about. Quite often Maori are all painted with the same brush, but each tribal area has their own customs. We do share a language, but there are different dialects within across the country. All of the iwi or tribes here, these borderlines also can be taken with a grain of salt. Our borders were shifted and renegotiated and continue to do so over time. And even kind of within these borderlines, there are other tribes and sub-tribes that flourish, but kind of what happened when we still are fighting for treaty rights and recognitions. People kind of joined forces, and so then sometimes multiple tribes come under one name on maps, not in real life. I live in the kind of central North Island on the east coast in the kind of green area, and that is mostly where I practice this earth pigment life. Next slide, please. I'm just going to give a bit of kind of context. Another word for Maori Indigenous people is tangata whenua, which literally means kind of people of the land. Land is hugely recognized and respected, and it's like hard to talk about how important the land is to Indigenous people, because it's ever present. In my Tūhoi dialect, we've got a word called mate mate aone, which it has lots of meanings, but it's a concept of belonging to the land and longing for the land. It's this, and sometimes it's referred to as kind of being encompassed or cocooned by the land. Mate mate ao one is a comforting idea, so much so that it makes death feel welcoming because we get to be returned to the land. It's very extreme. Indigenous people, we're very metaphoric, but I really hold that concept dear. It just makes sense for me, and I think it will for lots of earth pigment people. If we could flick through the next few slides, please. We can kind of see the land loss here. The next one. So this is over the last, from 1860 to 2000. And the next one, please. And the next. 2000, we are here. Maori owned land is in blue. So the separation of people from their land continues to be devastating, and that land was confiscated and given to farmers. A lot of those farmers still own and occupy those lands. It has, there's a lot of consequences that come from the displacement of Indigenous people and the kind of severing. So that's just a kind of a small bit of context before we get into the next slide, please, which is Koararo and who we are. That's me on the left. I'm Sarah Hudson. In the middle is my colleague Lana Cable, and on the right is Jordan Davey Eames. This is a picture of us at our first field trip. We've started to call our practice field trips when we go out, but this was definitely a road trip. We are friends who live in the same kind of smallish town with similar interests, with backgrounds in fine arts, visual arts, pottery. Lane is particularly into rongoa, or a customary Maori plant medicine. And our birthdays are in the same week in December, and we went for a road trip in our area to look at rock art. I'm not quite sure kind of what inspired this trip, but we did it, and it's kind of changed what we've been doing for the last year and a half. Next slide, please. The first stop was a Kaingaroa rock shelter. It's about 45 minutes inland from where we live. It's beautiful petroglyphs, carved. It's kind of maybe 10 meters long, and there's images of canoes and water and faces, and they're all different styles, heights. There's a lot to kind of take in. This is about 5 minutes walk from a main state highway, hidden. It's quite I've driven past that place hundreds of times and didn't know of its existence. So we spent a bit of time there, which was really special. There are a few significant or well-known Maori rock art sites in Aotearoa. and they're in the South Island. And there's lots of education around them and studies, and North Island rock art is less known. I think that there's a survey being done about different sites now. We're an island, so coastal sites are kind of exposed to erosion. And all of the kind of inland sites were quite often those lands were given away to farmers. So that there's that kind of severing of the people who kind of occupied, the Indigenous people who occupied and tended to those sites. So North Island rock sites are still quite under studied and represented. So it was great to see some in real life. I really liked and appreciated this rock site as to kind of see and note the different heights and styles. To me, this looked like lots of people were participating, of different heights or maybe of different ages and maybe throughout different times. It just kind of brought pictures to mind of just a group of people hanging out. There's quite a lot of people, and particularly Maori, kind of see these sites as, or talk about these sites as being extremely sacred. And I think that their age and longevity definitely equates to some form of sacredness. When I kind of looked at this place, it seemed really playful and fun, and I could imagine a family or a class of people spending time together. So it kind of really drilled home the collective making practice for me, and also just visual art experimentation. Next slide, please. We then drove about 20 minutes down the road to Maunga Kakaramea, or it's often referred to as Rainbow Mountain, where we saw kokowai for the first time, our red ochre. This was a kind of colour-rich landscape, geologically quite dynamic. We're in kind of volcano country. We're on volcanic lands. Lots of geothermal activity. A 15-minute scenic walk took us about an hour because we were going so slowly and noticing every colour and touching and scraping and getting to know the land in a way that we hadn't before. These are places that we are kind of familiar to us, or ideas that are familiar to us, but for the first time on this trip, we were kind of embodying that experience. Next slide, please. The next slide is, so we then drove about half an hour again and saw rock paintings. We recognised the same red ochre that we had just seen down the road. These images depict canoes again and people. This was buried in volcanic eruption and then uncovered by, I think it was the Rotorua Historic Society. This spot is about 1 minute walk from a cafe car park. No one else was there. No, it's quite a remote cafe, but it is interesting to have kind of our contemporary culture just existing alongside car parks and cafes next to these really beautiful, important communications from our ancestors. That was really special. So this red's really bright and access is easy. Can I have the next slide, please? This kind of day trip, this was just a day trip. We had 4 kids separately at home waiting for us to get back from this day trip. What it did was really kind of solidify some things for me. I have been a practicing artist my whole life. I've always seen art as a big part of my identity, and alongside that, I'm Maori, and that's a really big part of my identity as well. This was the first time that I kind of recognized that I come from a really long lineage of art, my cultural practice, and it really inspired me to learn more about the techniques and the materials of my ancestors, and just bring that into my practice. Yeah, next slide, please. So red ochre, kokowai, is a big part of our kind of cultural identity, but perhaps only conceptually. Before this research, I had only ever seen kokowai, red ochre, being used once in ceremony, but our kind of creation narratives talk about the first woman being formed by red fertile clay at Kurawaka, which in our narratives is the kind of the fertile pubic area of our earth mother, Papatūānuku. So we kind of have these ideas that we learn as kids, that we humans are kind of formed from clay, and so that personification, or that intertwined nature, just kind of really is easy to grasp, I guess. So we talk about these ideas, but we haven't really used them. We don't really use them practically as much. Next slide, please. Customarily, so historically, pre-colonially, let's say that, red ochre was used as an art material in ceremony, as medicine, and for personal adornment. It was mixed with different oils, and those oils had properties for interior or exterior use. I just got to meet kind of all 8 of these paddles that are depicted here, kind of canoe paddles, that they are in the collection of the British Museum and a few museums across Europe. And for the, I think it might have been 150th or 200th anniversary of when they were taken by Cook, they came back to Aotearoa for the first time, and so I travelled 3 or 4 hours east to go and visit them. They are the oldest examples of our decorative painting, and to be drawn in red ochre as well. These were they're really special treasures. Next, please. So ochre was used to decorate and protect our dwellings, but also I think from kind of historical accounts that I've read, it was a kind of an everyday look. There are particular ancestors who had kind of signature looks, whether it was a kind of yellow forehead, or I've read about kind of one particular iwi where I'm from, Tuhoi, women had blue cheeks and blue lips, red, white, black, yellows, and blues were used on our skin. From what I've read, from what I've seen in the field, I think that there would have been a really beautiful earthly spectrum of colours used by my ancestors, because the colours that we have had at our fingertips have such a beautiful variety. Yeah, so this is just my theory through practicing. So we read a bit, and we also talked to quite a few people, and one elder who has spent her whole life working with whales talked us through some of the different whale oil properties. Every species has different type of oil, and that would be used for exterior, interior, skin. So we didn't, all of the kind of historical accounts just talk kind of really generally, whale oil, but there's kind of more research to be done about the specific properties of different species. As for kind of, because we used ochre cosmetically, we also used it in medicinally. So different mineral contents behave differently on skin and help with different ailments, and also as a sunblock and as insulation, another layer to keep away bugs or keep warmth in. We have heard stories of a group of people who kind of traversed alpine mountains, and as well as kind of being geared up with their garments, they were head to toe covered in pukepoto, which is a blue earth pigment. And I would imagine this would be for insulation, but also I think kind of metaphysically to be in a group of people who were head to toe in blue, dressed up, ready to climb snowy mountains. That would kind of I think that would do something energetically to motivate you to keep moving. And then once you get to the other side of the range, anyone who sees a group of blue people coming down the side of a mountain, I imagine you would keep away from them. You would give them their space to kind of go where they need to go. I think that would be a really impressive sight. And kind of hearing little pieces of these stories is really exciting to me, and makes me want to know more, but also practice more, get more in touch with get more in touch with this beautiful material. Next, please. This was the first red ochre paint that I made after our first road trip. In the poem this morning, it talked about kind of some materials resisting being turned into paint and others jumping. Like this seemed to kind of jump at the chance to become a paint. And again, that was a kind of another encouraging sign for this body of work. Next, please. We started using Instagram pretty much immediately. Instagram is a great tool for me as an artist. It's free. I'm visual, and you can say a lot with these images. So we started posting really early. I kind of look back on these and go, we didn't know what we were doing, but we were reconnecting and we're relearning. And hopefully in a year and a half's time, I look back on the Instagram now and go, oh, I had no idea what I was doing. We were looking at historical texts and having to wade through that colonial kind of lens that had been put on our cultural practices, which was really hard, and it still is to read some of those things. But we were doing what we could kind of research-wise, and then kind of physically researching, trialing, testing, playing. We allocated our Friday mornings after that first road trip to research. We get together on Fridays, our kids are in preschool, and we just go out and re-familiarize ourselves with these places that we've grown up around. Next, please. Oh yeah, then COVID happened, and in March 2020, Aotearoa went into quite a harsh lockdown period. It was kind of really swift. I think we had a day's notice, and then everyone was restricted to their own properties, and you could go for a walk once a day, social distanced, but only in your neighborhood. So no one was allowed to drive anywhere unless you were getting food, and you were only allowed to get food once a week. It was very restricted. So this kind of 3 or 4 months that we had reconnecting with the land was seemingly severed again. I was stuck in my kind of suburban section. We live with my mum, my partner, our 4-year-old at the time, and my sister and her 4-year-old at the time. So we had 3 generations, all on the same kind of small suburban property. And I was really longing for the coast, places where my ancestors occupied, because they had the good spots by the beach, by the river. Now those good spots cost multi-millions of dollars, which subsequently means that Maori don't occupy those spaces proportionally. So I kind of spent lockdown processing all the things that I had collected over 3 months, and reading as much as we could find stuff on the internet, but also kind of feeling bitter that some people were able to enjoy these kind of places that are so special to our people, but they're not. It wasn't me and it wasn't us. Which was just a kind of another reminder of systems that still exist, but were kind of a bit more invisible before lockdown, because I could just drive to these places. But then when you kind of had to sit in your own house and go, what resources do I have and my community have at our fingertips? You know, this is a food desert. This is, kind of food sovereignty issues came up, and just kind of general Indigenous agency issues. Next slide, please. So I made paint and kind of processed these things. And when I was making paint, and I was kind of following old recipes or kind of clues left in these historical texts, I knew that somewhere other Maori were using this material, and I desperately wanted to connect with them. Next slide, please. So I searched hashtag kokowai on Instagram. Instagram was really cool for us to connect with Earth Pigment people straight away, just with this great tool of a hashtag. And I think Heidi was one of the kind of first people to reach out. She's so friendly and great and accessible, and I really appreciate the amount of sharing that goes on between us Earth Pigment peeps. It just listening to this morning to some of the talks, I'm like, kind of things are connecting up that I have experienced. So I really appreciate that. Side note. Thankfully, some really great and generous Maori artists were hashtagging kokowai on Instagram. Next slide, please. The first was Sian Montgomery Newts, who's Ngā Arahu Inc. on Instagram. She is a teacher, tāmoko artist, so our kind of customary tattoo practices, and an artist. And so we started messaging. Next one, please. The next one is Nico Hinden, who is kind of known in Aotearoa for revitalising our practice of ote, which is bark cloth. And she spent a lot of time in Hawaii learning, and then has brought that kind of knowledge back. So she only uses earth pigments in her works. Next, please. So we were still in lockdown, and we were messaging, and I really wanted to see these people face to face. But we couldn't. So I came up with an idea of a kind of knowledge art exchange between Māori artists who are using whenua, or like land, in their work, either conceptually or physically, because there's every Māori artist, maybe that's a big claim, but a very high percentage of Māori artists make work about the land. It's just it's a kind of, it takes up a lot of our space, our mental, cultural space and thoughts. So I wanted to make a project connecting all these people and ideas and gathering contemporary knowledge, because that's what I couldn't find. I couldn't find any contemporary uses except for hashtag kokowai on Instagram. During lockdown, our kind of government arts ministry was pumping heaps of money to support artists who had lost contracts, had kind of uncertain period ahead. And so I applied to do this project to connect in some kind of meaningful way. And so Mana Whenua was supported by an arts continuity grant, which meant the artists could get paid and I could print a book. Win-win. So in my proposal, it was about whakawhanaungatanga, so like an internet connectedness relating to each other. And it was in lieu of this idea of wānanga. So usually customarily Māori learn in kind of whare wānanga, learning spaces. It's face-to-face. It can be a physical site, but usually it kind of refers to just like a state. You're in a state of, and you're open to learning and receiving information and also reciprocating that knowledge. To me, and maybe all humans, face-to-face stuff is really important. And I was thinking of how I can recreate this idea of wānanga, but not face-to-face. Next slide, please. So I came up with this idea of sending questions on a postcard that's decorated in earth pigments to different artists around the country. Each artist got a specific question pertaining to their practice, and I gave them the materials to then respond in an artwork. So they had earth pigments that I gathered, that I kind of, I don't know, in Māori it's I whakapapatu, I am genealogically connected to. And I kind of gifted that to them. And then they kind of gifted me their knowledge back. Ochre exchange was a big part of pre-colonial life. There are kind of sites of rock art up and down the country where kokowai doesn't naturally occur. So it was taken there and travelled. There are many instances in museum collections of kind of art kits that travelled with people who were kind of going to and from places with ochre and sewing needles and all sorts. So this idea of exchanging earth is not new, basically. It's a cultural practice. I then received everyone's letters and artworks back and collated it into a book, which is Mana Whenua. Next slide, please. I have been an artist my whole life, but I've never worked with paint. And then when I decided to do this project, I realized that I had to do 11 paintings, which was a challenge. And then I also, it was going to be 11 paintings that were going to be published in a book by me, not a painter. So I decided to focus on the spectrum of colours that I had found over the last 3 months prior to this project. And then it was specific questions to these artists. Next slide, please. Then the book got made. It was like Christmas, getting things in the post over the course of a month. Everyone responded to the project differently, and I really appreciate everyone's effort. Everyone was really responded really kind of in meaningful ways. It was a really nice project. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show you a few examples because some artists sent lots of works back. I sent them a few different papers in case they wanted to do a few drafts or whatever. And then some artists sent back 4 works, which was really generous and exciting. This is Aisha Green. She has won kind of a few big contemporary painting awards in Aotearoa. Next slide, please. And she recently opened this exhibition called Good Citizen in Wellington, just last month, I think, but she used kokowai. In the Mana Whenua project, it was the first time she had gathered it herself, and the kind of first time she's used it. So she really harnessed that opportunity to introduce a new material into her practice, but also just try something, just play, which I really appreciate from Aisha. Next, please. Kahukutia supplied us with 4 paintings, and her response back was really brief and really beautiful response to my questions. And mate wase aone again is that tūhoe word that I was speaking of at the beginning. Next, please. Others were just like kind of really simple but still complicated responses back. So this is from Ana Iti. Next. Raukura Ture had a kind of painting practice using pukepoto, which is our blues. But I think her one actually might have a different name. So she's been using earth pigments for a few years. Next, please. And she just recently opened a show. So she usually works much larger scale. This is earth pigments and oil. Next, please. And this is Tessa Williams, who is not in Mana Whenua, but has followed our kawairaro research and has incorporated earth pigments into her practice. She's a student at a Maori visual art program in Palmerston North, and she's won 2 awards just this year using national awards using earth pigments, and it's been really exciting to see the kind of ripple effects of getting these examples of contemporary use out into the world. Next, please. So that's us. That's us for today. I've got 10 minutes. I thought I'd be quicker than that for more questions, but so we're Kawairaro Research Collective, and I published a book last year, and this year we've been doing more research projects, kind of tribal specific research projects, developing pigments that people belong to and palettes that people belong to. And another kind of way of getting getting out there, getting these ideas out there, is doing workshops. So we're planning to do more workshops with Māori youth, just basics of connecting to the land in this way. Thanks. Thank you. That's me. Is there any questions? Is that your job, Melanie?
Yeah, I was looking for my unmute button. Pardon me? What do you mean you could hear me? Oh, during the presentation or? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chelsea. Here, I'm trying to get this to scroll down so I can read it. It says, this is from Audra Mitchell. She says, I love your idea of land back one handful at a time. Could you please share a little bit more about links with land return movements in Aotearoa and globally?
Yeah, the land back kind of political movement has really recently inspired Indigenous people here in Aotearoa. I kind of recognise that it's come from a lineage and a whole chunk of work from a kind of native family in Ontario Island. And I think that if you kind of see the maps of the displacement and the confiscation of Māori land, it can kind of give you an idea of a sense that of the desire that Indigenous people have to have some of that back. And it's about, yes, literally giving land back, but it's also about reclamation of our rights on these lands and to these lands. We want our ceremonies back. We want our languages back. We want our bodies back. Yeah, land back's a really interesting political movement to look up. It's quite a big one, but we are literally going to places that our people no longer occupy, taking handfuls of dirt, bringing them home and cherishing them and using them to communicate.
This lady, Jennifer Rain Crosby, is asking the same.
Oh, you're on mute.
Am I muted again? Can you hear me?
Oh, no. Sorry.
Okay. Jennifer Rain Crosby is asking the same question I was. What is, oh, now I lost it. Well, I'll ask it. What is the color behind you and where did it come from?
This is my Ngāti Pūkeko colour. This is from land where my ancestors occupied and is now filled with pine forests. And pine trees are not Indigenous to this land. They are brought here to make money. And they often kind of pose this big barrier to reconnecting, because it also kind of indicates ownership. So this is earth on canvas, and we didn't know that this color was so close to us. Like, it's just kind of, it's close to where I live. We've had a really big journey with this color, and in a few months we're launching a website centered around Maori use of kokowai, and I've been writing a piece just to this color. So I'll be sure to share it on Instagram.
Great. Mia Uram says, wonderful presentation. I've learned a lot. I've started developing an interest in the history of pigments in tattoo use. I was wondering if that is also something you came into contact with. And for some reason, my scroller isn't working. Is that also something you came into contact with, and potentially meaning of the use of the pigment materials?
Yeah. We have dipped into quite a bit of that in museum collections. There's quite a bit of content around tattooing in our museums, maybe in all museums. Weapons were collected, and kind of really fine weaving from Maori, but not heaps of tools. But tattoo tools were collected. So we've been looking at containers, and there was a really big kind of resurgence of our customary Maori tattoos in the 90s. It has kind of been all along, but there's been lots of people who have done a big amount of work. I see Kamalu is here from Honolulu, and I know that she's worked with Chaz Doherty, who did a big chunk of work for investigation into our customary tattoo pigments. So yeah, it's really interesting and intertwining.
Do you have any ideas how the pigments were processed and then applied for tattooing?
Yeah, there's a lot. A type of fungus that eats or kind of envelops moths when they're in a kind of chrysalis stage. This fungus would take over the chrysalis, and then that was burnt, and the soot was used for pigment, for ink.
Wow.
There are some people getting back into that practice now, and particular tree resin soot as well for the black. But there's lots of variants and lots of different recipes that I'd love to some time to investigate.
It'd be nice to have them all put together, like in a cookbook.
Yes.
Let's see. Jackie Yeoman says, I'm lucky to live with the same land that my ancestors have been stewards of. I've moved away, but home is like a magnet, and this is where my soul belongs. In response to you saying what pigments belong to you, it is red ochre. Beautiful presentation. Thank you. And
thank you.
We are out of time. Thank you so much, Sarah. This was really interesting, and we have to talk more. Compare notes.
Yeah, please. That was a lot. Thanks everyone for listening. I really appreciate your time.
Well, we really appreciate you sharing everything with us. Thank you. We have a break for half an hour. You can You can all go get coffee, stretch your legs, run to the bathroom. And I believe that we have the space that's open just for meeting other people and networking and talking and sharing ideas. We will reconvene in half an hour. Great morning, everyone. Thank you. Chelsea. Hi. So we're oh, okay. Okay.